Hello and welcome back to the So Jealous channel, your one-stop shop for everything crochet amigurumi related. Today we're going to be doing a YouTube tutorial on different types of stitches. So today we're going to do the single crochet, the half double crochet, and then the double crochet. And I'm going to be doing this in plush yarn to show you what it looks like in plush yarn, but I'm also going to show you an acrylic yarn so you can see the stitches better, because plush yarn is quite soft. It's actually very difficult to see the definition of each stitch. So let's get started. So I'm going to start the tutorial with the acrylic yarn so you can see the definition of the stitches and the technique better. And then I'm going to go on to show you how that looks in the plush yarn. So the first stitch that we're doing today is the single crochet. Again, shout out to What the Hook Creations who made this crochet hook for me. So let's get started. I am going to be showing you the crochet stitches in a panel piece. I'm not going to show you in the round. So you're going to make your slip knot. So you take your yarn, you want to have your end to the left of you depending on which way you crochet, left or right, and you're basically going to make a little loop like this, twist, and you want to pull the opposite yarn. So I'm making this twist and it's created a cross, and I'm going to be pulling the opposite yarn. So there's my cross. I want to get the opposite yarn, if I can just, so this string, the opposite yarn is that piece of string there. And then I'm going to pull. And I'm going to insert my hook. This is a 4mm hook. And I'm going to tighten up that slip stitch. Don't want it too tight. So that's my slip stitch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain on how many stitches I need. So for our purposes, let's do 15. So to chain on, what we need to do is have our hook in this sort of position. So our slip stitch is on the hook. We've got a good grip on our hook and we're holding the main piece of the yarn. So this is our tail. We're holding like our feeding yarn. And it's really important to do this with a consistent tension. So I'm going to show you how I keep my tension. I take my yarn and I wrap it around my baby finger like so. I then bring it up over the 3 fingers and then I wrap it over the top of my pointer finger, and I then have my tension. So it will work its way around my baby finger and top finger, keeping my tension consistent. And you don't want to be gripping your yarn really tight. It doesn't need to be grip tight. Your fingers, just the friction from your fingers being there will be enough to keep your tension consistent. So to cast on, we're going to use our, what I'm going to call the feeding yarn, and we're going to go under the yarn. So you're bringing a loop over, but you're going under the yarn to get the loop on top of the hook, and you're going to pull through. So again, we're going to go under the yarn, which creates a loop on top of your hook, and you're going to pull through like so. So 3, 4. And what you'll need to do the more you cast on is you just need to reposition your fingers. So that was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now my panel is going to be 14 stitches wide, but I need to crochet 1 extra stitch, so I'm having 15 overall, because your last stitch on your chain is going to be your turning stitch. So we're now starting our first row, having now hooked 15 stitches. So I'm going to skip this top stitch here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to crochet into the second stitch. So this is stitch 1, this is stitch 2, and on your starting row you've got 2 options as to how you want to crochet. I, especially as a beginner, I'm going to use the top loop. So you can see here I've got my bottom loop and then I've got my top loop on the left hand side. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to single crochet, and it's exactly the same motion that you've used to do your casting chain. So you're going to go through that top loop for your starting row, you're going to bring your hook under and over the top of the yarn. You're going to pull through. You now have 2 loops on your hook, and you're going to go again around, and you're going to pull through both of those loops. Now, in US terminology, this is called the single crochet, and I prefer US terminology because to me it makes more sense. In UK terminology, this is actually called a double crochet, but for the purposes of my tutorials, we'll be using US references or US terms. So that's 1 crochet done. So I'm then going to go into the second stitch. So I can see here that this is the stitch that I've just come out from, this top loop here. So I'm going to go down to the next one from it because I'm not increasing on this panel, and I'm going through, bringing my hook around and over the yarn, pulling through so I have 2 loops on my hook, and then again I'm bringing my hook under and then over to then pull through a loop. So we're then moving on to the next stitch. I'm going to go through, under and over to pick up a stitch, and then I've got my 2 loops. I'm then going under and over again to pull through a loop through both stitches, or both loops on my hook. So again, just to show you, through, under to over, create a loop, under to over, pull through both loops. You're going to do that all the way down the chain. So I'm probably just going to speed this up. So I've now gotten to my last stitch of the row. So although I chained on 15 stitches, there are only 14 stitches in my row, because one of the stitches is our chaining circle, our chaining loop. So I've got to 14. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to do 1 more. So again, very similar to how we cast it on or did our foundation chain. So I'm going to do 1 more to create this additional loop, and then I'm going to turn. And like we did in the beginning, I'm going to skip this first stitch, which is our turning stitch. And now we're on our second row, and it's going to look a bit different because you'll see now we've got 2 loops. Before we had a top and a bottom loop, and this time we've got 2 loops. So this is the 2 loops here. So you've got your front, because this is facing me this way. So this is my front loop here, my front loop, and then I've got my back loop, and then together it's 1 whole stitch. You can just about see that. So again, I've got this little row of these lovely little V's. Now, if your pattern is asking you to work in the front loop only, what you'll do is you'll only go through this top one. If it's asking you to work in the back loop only, you're going to come from up above basically and go down and just crochet through the back loop. And if it just asks for a standard single crochet, you're going to go through and go underneath both loops, which is what we're doing today. So I've gone through both of my loops. I'm going to go under and over to pull up another loop, under and over to pull through another loop that goes through the 2 that's already on my crochet hook. So it's exactly the same motion that we've just done. I just have two little parallel bars, stitches to go through in order to complete my single crochet. So again, we're going to go underneath both of those V's. So I've got both stitches of the V on my hook, and then we're going to complete the single crochet. So just really nice and close and slow. I'm going underneath both of those. So you can see I've got that V with both stitches. If I can just get this in focus. See that V there with both stitches on my hook. And then I'm going to go under and over and then pull through both of those loops, stitch that 1 stitch. So I've now got 2 loops on my hook, and I'm going to go under and over again and pull that through both of those stitches. And that is how you complete your single crochet. My recommendation for when you're learning is to do swatches of the same stitch. So maybe do 15, 20, 30 rows of the same stitch over and over and over again. And that will really help you to understand about your tension and how the stitches should be looking. Most people will be like, I want to do amigurumi, and they try it and then they end up with something which is very holy. It isn't very uniform, the stitches aren't consistent, and that's because they've neglected the foundations. So my recommendation is to always do a couple of swatches of the same stitch over and over again. You'll become really competent in the motion. You'll see how your tension changes as you go, the more competent that you get, and you'll understand how varying tensions affect how the piece will look overall. So if I start with a very loose tension and then get tighter, I'm going to have a piece that's fatter at the bottom and narrower at the top, which is not what I want, because it's going to alter whatever it is I'm making. If it's a garment, it's not going to fit properly, etc. So this is single crochet. If we go in for a closer look, you can see how this is meant to look when you're doing single crochet over and over again. And I just want to show you this very quickly in the plush yarn before we move on to the half double crochet. So same thing, I'm going to do my slip stitch in this yarn, pull, and this is just going to be a smally one for a demo piece. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then turning. So again here I've got my top and I've got my bottom, and for these purposes you'll want to use the top. The other method that you can use, which is really popular, is we've got what we call the back bumps. So this is like a little bump. Let's try and get this one up, it's a bit easier. So you can see here we've got like this little bump here, and it runs vertical, and lots of people will crochet into the back bump. So this would be our first back bump, which we want to avoid. So you then go into your second back bump, and the same thing, you'll complete the single crochet, and then you'll want to go into the next bump, which is here. And this is more tricky to start, which is why I don't recommend it for beginners, but I will show you, it gives you a different finish on the edge of your piece. Again, for purposes of amigurumi, this isn't an issue because you're working in the round. This is more for doing panel pieces, so garments, clothing, hats, scarves, things like that. Wall hangings is another one. The last back bump I always find really tricky. There we go. So I've completed, and what you'll see is the end, the bottom edge of my piece has like a row of V's, so it looks like a row of completed stitches, whereas in my other piece that I did, all I've got is that front, that back, the bottom or the back loop that we left, so it has just like a little lip. This is like a very flush flat edge. So I've done my 6. I'm going to do my chain 1, and then I'm going to turn. We're missing this first stitch, and you can see that seeing the stitches with plush yarn is a little bit more difficult. The V isn't so obvious because the yarn is quite fat and quite plush. You can sort of see a line down the middle. So I've got my front loop, and then my back loop is the other side of that line. So I'm just going to complete one more row this mini piece, 5 and 6. And then this is how your single crochet will look in the plush yarn. So just for comparison, and you'll see the different edge as well there. So that is the single crochet. So the next stitch that I'm going to walk through with you is the half double crochet. This is a stitch that you sometimes use to do additional features. So in our bee pattern, we use the half double crochet on the bee wings. So I'm using a different colour yarn. I'm hoping that this yarn will you'll be able to see just as well as the red. So I've done a couple of rows of single crochet, just 2 rows in my foundation chain of single crochet, and I'm going to show you now what the half double crochet stitch looks like. So I'm just going to zoom in for you here. So ordinarily for your single crochet, you're going to go straight into your stitches here. With the half double crochet, what you're going to do first of all is wrap the yarn around the needle like so. So very much very similar to what you would do when you are pulling through on a single crochet. So you're going to wrap the yarn and you're just going to hold it very lightly with your finger here so it doesn't get in your way. And then you're going to go in as you would doing a single crochet and you're going to pull through your yarn. And what you've now got is 3 loops on your hook. And in the same way that you would finish off a single crochet, you're going to wrap again. And what you're going to do is you're going to pull your hook through all 3 loops. So I'm going to show you that again. So you're going to take your yarn and wrap it around your hook before you insert into the stitch on the previous row. And then you're going to complete as you would a normal single crochet. So you're going to bring a loop through, wrap a loop around the hook. But there's now 3 loops on the hook and you're just going to pull it through all 3. So wrap, into the cave, out of the cave, wrap, pull through 3 loops, wrap, into the cave, wrap around, out of the cave, 3 loops on your crochet hook, wrap, and pull through all 3. And that is the half double crochet. It's ever so slightly taller than the single crochet, and you can kind of see the difference here. So these are my single crochet stitches, and here's my half double crochet. It's got like 2 little lines here that makes it sort of stack slightly taller. It's a really lovely, easy stitch to use. It's not used traditionally in amigurumi because amigurumi is almost all single crochet. But like I said, you will find that you'll use this as sort of a decorative stitch for things that you're going to sew on. This stitch here is called a picot stitch. So again, it's an amigurumi, but I've used a little specialist stitch in order to create the illusion of little wings. Now, what I want to add is when you're working in the round, this won't necessarily be a problem if you're working in the round, not something you'll need to think about unless the pattern tells you. But when you're working backwards and forwards along a panel, you obviously have a turning chain, and dependent on the type of stitch that you're doing will determine how big your turning chain is. So for half double crochet, I still only complete a 1 stitch before I turn and then go back again. So for a single crochet, you do a 1 turning chain stitch. I also only do a 1 turning chain stitch for the half double crochet. So the last stitch that I'm going to show you today is the double crochet. In US terms, this is the double crochet. In UK terms, I believe this is the triple. Again, this isn't a stitch that you will use often when you're doing amigurumi, but you may use it when doing things like wings or other sort of additional features. So again, I'm sticking with the green here to show you. So let's zoom in. this stitch isn't really any different to any of the other stitches that you've done. All the techniques that you've learned in those stitches are in this stitch. So there's nothing new to learn here except for how you complete the stitch. So very much as we did before with the half double crochet, we're going to loop our yarn around and we're just going to hold it very lightly onto our hook. So we've got a loop. We're going to go into our stitch as we would ordinarily. We're going to loop around and pull through. So again, I have my 3 loops on the hook. So that is exactly the same as the half double crochet at the moment. And then I'm going to loop around and I'm only going to pull through those first 2 loops. So I still have 2 loops on my hook. And then I'm going to loop around and pull through the last 2 stitches. So wrap around, into the cave, wrap around, out of the cave, pick up a loop, pull through 2 stitches or 2 loops on the hook, and then wrap around and pull through the last 2. So wrap around, into the cave, wrap around and pull through out of the cave, 3 stitches on my hook, wrap around, pull through the first 2 stitches, wrap around, pull through the last 2 stitches on the hook, and then one more time, wrap around, into the cave, wrap around, pull through out of the cave, 3 stitches, loops on my hook, wrap around, pull through 2 of those loops, and wrap around and pull through the final 2 loops.